Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at risk modeling.
Oh, yeah.
We've got an article and a PDF,
Oh,
and they're both titled the same thing.
all right.
The modeling of risk evaluation, risk appetite, and risk tolerance.
Big title.
Yeah, it is a big title.
Lot to unpack there,
Yeah.
but it's going to be fun.
Yeah. And we're not just going to talk about what risk modeling is. We're also going to talk about how you can use it
Okay.
to make smarter decisions.
All right, like having a secret weapon for dealing with uncertainty.
I like it.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics.
Okay.
What exactly is risk?
So think of it this way.
Okay.
Anytime we're working towards a goal, there's always a chance that things might not go as planned.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty,
Okay.
that's where risk comes in.
So it's not just about, like, bad things happening.
Right.
It's just about anything that could, like, throw us off course.
Exactly.
Okay.
Our sources actually give a few different definitions.
Yeah.
ISO Guide 73 talks about the probability of an event and its consequences. ISO 31000 focuses on how uncertainty affects objectives.
Okay.
And the NIST cybersecurity framework.
Yeah.
That one really zooms in on how threats and vulnerabilities play into risk.
So it's kind of like, no matter how you slice it,
Yeah.
risk is all about dealing with the unknown.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the risk matrix.
Yes.
This visual tool for, like, understanding and managing those unknowns.
It's like a map of your risk landscape.
Okay.
Imagine a grid.
Okay.
One side represents the likelihood of a risk happening. The other side represents the impact if it does.
Okay.
Each point on that grid shows you the level of risk
Gotcha.
for a specific scenario.
So if something is highly likely to happen,
Right.
and D would have a huge impact,
Yes.
it would land in, like, the high-risk zone.
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
And to make things even clearer, we can color code it,
Oh,
creating what's called a risk heat map.
okay.
Think red for high risk.
Yellow for moderate
Okay.
and green for low.
This is making me think of those spicy food challenge videos
Uh-huh.
where they use a heat map to show like which peppers will melt your face off.
Well, maybe not that extreme,
Yeah, true.
but you get the idea.
Yeah, I get it.
The visual representation helps us quickly grasp the level of risk
Uh-huh.
we're dealing with.
But what happens when we have a ton of risks to consider?
Right.
It seems like it would get pretty overwhelming trying to
It can.
track them all.
Yeah. Our sources suggest
Okay.
instead of getting lost in a sea of individual risks, we can group them into bigger categories
Okay.
or scenarios.
Gotcha.
This way, we can get a handle on the overall risk picture
Yeah,
without getting bogged down in the detail.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's like organizing your overflowing closet.
right.
You group similar items together and suddenly it's manageable.
Exactly.
But even with that, how do we move from these like general labels like high risk?
To actually putting numbers on things
Right.
so that we can make calculations and comparisons.
So that's where the idea of linking qualitative descriptions to
Right.
numerical values comes in.
Okay.
It's all about setting thresholds.
Thresholds. What do you mean?
Think of them like boundaries
Yeah.
or cutoff points.
Yeah.
Let's say we're talking about the impact of a risk. We could say that a negligible impact means a financial loss of less than $10,000,
Gotcha.
while a critical impact means a loss of
Yeah.
over $1 million.
So we're turning those descriptive labels into
Yes,
concrete numbers.
exactly.
But what if different risks have vastly different
Right.
potential impacts?
Yeah,
Like $1 million loss might be devastating for one company,
right.
but just a minor setback for another.
You're right.
Yeah,
Context matters.
totally.
That's why we normalize those impact values
Okay.
using the company's maximum loss capacity.
Okay.
Let's say a company's absolute worst-case scenario loss is $100 million.
So a $1 million loss would be 1% of their maximum loss capacity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we can represent that as 0.01 on a scale of 0 to 1.
Gotcha.
This way we can compare the impact of different risks in a standardized way.
Okay, so we figured out impact. What about probability?
Okay.
How do we attach numbers to terms like likely or unlikely?
The process is similar.
Okay.
We can use historical data, expert opinions,
Okay.
or a combination of both to estimate the likelihood
Okay.
of different events occurring.
So let's say historical data suggests
Yeah.
there's a 20% chance of a particular cybersecurity threat
Okay.
affecting the company.
Right.
We could then assign the label unlikely to that 20% probability.
And just like with impact,
Yeah.
we can normalize that probability on a scale of 0 to 1, giving us 0.2 in this case.
This is all starting to click.
Good.
We're essentially turning those descriptive risk categories
Right.
into a set of numbers that we can actually use to make calculations. Which brings us to what our sources call the intermediate matrix.
This is where things start to get interesting.
Ooh.
The intermediate matrix takes all those numerical values for probability and impact, along with the thresholds we've set, and uses them to calculate specific risk levels.
So it's like the engine behind the scenes that crunches all the numbers and spits out a clear picture of our risk landscape.
You got it.
And because we're working with estimates and probabilities, the intermediate matrix helps us create ranges or intervals between different risk levels.
Exactly.
So small variations in our estimations don't result in dramatic shifts in the overall risk level.
Exactly.
So we're not getting bogged down in trying to be overly precise with our numbers.
It's more about understanding the general level of risk we're dealing with. It's about finding that sweet spot between accuracy and practicality. And once we have this intermediate matrix with its calculated risk levels, we can start defining our risk tolerance.
So that's where we decide, like, what level of risk we're comfortable with.
Exactly. We're essentially setting boundaries for what's acceptable, what we can tolerate, and what requires immediate attention. Our sources point out that the intermediate matrix can help us determine things like the level of risk acceptance for different scenarios, the acceptable range of risk within each level, and even identify risks that fall below a certain threshold. That might not need further assessment.
So it's not just about identifying risks. It's about having a system for managing them. Based on their level and our tolerance.
Exactly.
This is feeling pretty powerful.
It is.
It's all about making informed decisions. And we've only just scratched the surface.
We have.
Now, before we dive into the practical applications of all this, let's take a quick break. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've laid the groundwork. You know, defining risk, building that all-important intermediate matrix. Now, let's see how all of this plays out in the real world.
Because let's be honest, you know, numbers and matrices, they're great. But they only become truly useful when we can apply them to actual situations and make smarter decisions.
Absolutely. Our sources don't get into specific case studies. But we can kind of use the concepts they present to explore some real-world scenarios. Let's say you're a company. And you're trying to decide whether to invest in a brand new technology. How could risk modeling help you make that call?
You could use it to assess both the potential upside and the risks involved. Think about things like market volatility, competitors' actions, or even the chance that the technology becomes obsolete quickly. You'd use the tools we've discussed to figure out the likelihood of those risks.
And the impact they could have.
So you'd create like a risk profile for that investment.
Exactly. Weighing the potential rewards against the uncertainties.
And that's where your risk appetite comes in. How much risk are you willing to take on for the potential payoff?
Exactly.
Makes sense? Like a startup trying to disrupt the market might have a higher risk appetite than a well-established company that's focused on stability.
And even within the same organization, risk appetite can change depending on project or department.
Makes sense.
You might be willing to take more risks in R&D than you would with your core operations.
So it's not just about identifying and quantifying risk. It's also about knowing how much risk you're
Exactly. And remember how we talked about using a database to manage multiple risk matrices? That comes in handy here. You can essentially create different risk profiles tailored to
specific situations.
So you could have one matrix for evaluating risky investments. And another for assessing the risks of a new product launch.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. But once you've done all that analysis and created those profiles, what then, like, how do you actually use that information to make a decision?
That's where communication becomes crucial. It's not enough to just crunch the numbers. You have to be able to explain those findings to the people making the decisions. And that's where those qualitative labels like negligible or critical come back into play.
Because those labels help us translate all that technical analysis into something that's easier to understand and act on.
Precisely. You need a language that resonates with decision makers.
Gotcha.
And don't forget those visuals.
Yeah.
A risk heat map can be incredibly powerful when you're trying to communicate complex risk information.
It's true.
Yeah.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's shift gears for a moment.
Okay.
Consider another scenario.
Mm-hmm.
What about a government agency that's planning for a natural disaster?
Okay.
How could risk modeling help them prepare?
That's a great example. They could use risk modeling to figure out which areas are most vulnerable.
Okay.
Assess the potential impact of different disaster scenarios, and figure out how to allocate resources effectively.
So they'd need to consider things like population density, the quality of the infrastructure, and the likelihood of different types of disasters.
Absolutely. And that information could help them make decisions about evacuation plans, infrastructure improvements, and emergency response strategies.
So risk modeling can actually help make communities safer and more resilient?
Exactly. And we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
Risk modeling has applications across a huge range of industries and fields.
From finance to healthcare.
Yes.
Cybersecurity to environmental management. Becoming an essential tool for dealing with complex challenges.
It's about empowering people to make proactive choices that align with their goals and their risk tolerance.
Oh, I like it.
But there's one more crucial piece to this puzzle that we need to discuss.
And what's that?
It's the idea that risk modeling is an ongoing process. Not a one-time event. Risk profiles can change as new information emerges or circumstances shift.
So we can't just create a risk model and then forget about it.
Exactly.
We have to constantly be reevaluating and updating it.
Think about it like checking the weather forecast before you head out on a hike. Conditions can change quickly, and you need to be aware of any potential storms or hazards.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So just like with weather forecasting, risk modeling involves dealing with probabilities, not certainties.
That's right. We're making the best decisions we can based on the information we have at the time.
Right. But we also need to be prepared to adapt as new information comes to light.
Yeah, this is where my brain starts to get a little fried. It all seems so complex.
It can be.
How do you keep up with all the changes?
Right.
And make sure your risk models are staying relevant?
Well, that's one of the advantages of using a database approach.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about having those multiple matrices and setting thresholds?
Yeah.
You can actually build in triggers that automatically adjust your risk appetite based on certain conditions.
So if something happens that significantly increases the likelihood or impact of a particular risk, the system can automatically shift to a more conservative model.
It's like having a built-in safety net that adapts to changing conditions.
That's amazing. So risk modeling is actually evolving.
It is.
Alongside our understanding of risk itself.
And what's fascinating is that this evolution is being driven by
both technological advancements and our growing awareness of how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
We're realizing that risks don't exist in isolation.
Right.
They can cascade across systems and domains.
So we need risk models that reflect that complexity and interconnectedness.
Exactly. It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And understanding how risks can ripple through an organization, a community, or even society as a whole.
This has been incredibly insightful. But before we get too carried away, let's take a quick break. When we come back for part 3.
All right.
We'll wrap things up by looking at some specific real-world examples. And considering what it all means for you.
That's good.
Don't miss it. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've explored what risk modeling is and how it's used to make decisions.
Yeah.
In uncertain situations now. Let's bring it all home by looking at some concrete examples and discussing how you can apply these insights to your own life.
Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Empowering you to navigate risk more effectively and make choices that align with your goals.
Exactly. So let's get specific. Imagine you're faced with a major financial decision, like buying a house or investing in the stock market. How could you use the principles of risk modeling to approach that situation?
Think back to the risk matrix. You could start by listing out the potential risks associated with each option. For buying a house, you might consider things like interest rate fluctuations,
Yeah.
unexpected repairs,
Yeah.
or even the possibility of the housing market cooling down.
And for investing in the stock market,
Right.
you'd have to think about things like market volatility, economic downturns, or even the performance of specific companies.
Right. Then you could use your understanding of probability and impact to assess each of those risks. How likely is it to happen? And if it does, how much would it affect you financially?
So you're essentially creating a customized risk profile for each option.
And then you'd compare that profile to your own personal risk tolerance.
If you're someone who's comfortable with higher levels of risk,
Right.
you might be willing to invest in a more volatile stock.
Yeah.
But if you prefer a more conservative approach, you might choose a less risky investment, even if the potential returns are lower.
It's all about finding that balance
Yeah.
between risk and reward that aligns with your individual comfort level.
And the same principles can be applied to a wide range of decisions.
Yeah.
From career choices to planning for retirement.
It's amazing how versatile these risk modeling concepts are.
It really is.
They're not just for businesses or organizations.
Right.
They're tools that everyone can use to make more informed choices in their everyday lives.
And the more you practice thinking about risk
in
this structured way, the better equipped you'll be to navigate uncertainty.
Exactly.
And make decisions that lead to positive outcomes.
But it's important to remember that risk modeling isn't a foolproof system. It's a tool that can help you make better decisions.
Right.
But it's not a crystal ball.
So we still need to use our judgment and be prepared for the unexpected.
Right.
Even when we've done our best to assess the risks.
Exactly. The future is always uncertain.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes life interesting.
It is.
But by understanding the principles of risk modeling, we can approach that uncertainty with more confidence and clarity.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of risk modeling.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, from basic definitions
to
real-world applications, and hopefully you've come away with some valuable insights.
I hope so.
Remember, risk is an inevitable part of life.
Yeah.
But with the right tools and a clear understanding of how to use them, you can navigate uncertainty more effectively and make choices that lead you closer to your goals.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and remember, a little knowledge about risk can go a long way.